April 2026 has a very clear shape. It starts with a Libra full moon, so something is revealed immediately. A relationship issue, a decision, or a balance problem becomes too obvious to ignore. Then the pressure moves into Aries. That is the fast part of the month. Mars enters Aries on the 9th. Mercury follows on the 15th. The new moon in Aries on the 17th starts a new chapter in the Aries house of your chart. By the 20th, the tone changes. Taurus season begins, and Mars runs into Saturn. So whatever started moving in the middle of the month now has to become real, practical, and structured. The final week opens a different story. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th. Uranus follows on the 26th. So by the end of April, the Gemini house of your chart starts waking up in a completely new way. This is April 2026 for all 12 rising signs. And before we get into it, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which rising sign you're watching for. Watch your ascendant first, then your moon and sun. Aries rising. April starts with relationship matters front and center. The full moon in Libra on April 2nd falls in your 7th house. So the month opens with a relationship, a client matter, an agreement, or a conflict reaching a turning point. Something becomes obvious. A partner may want clarity. A client may push for a decision. A dynamic that has been off balance becomes harder to keep ignoring. This is the kind of full moon that exposes where one person has been carrying more of the weight. After that, the focus swings back to you very quickly. From April 9th onward, Aries becomes the hot zone of the month. Mars enters your sign, and that brings the first house story to life. More energy, more momentum, more directness, more urgency. You move faster, speak faster, and lose patience faster. The good side is that you stop hesitating. The bad side is that every delay can start to feel personal. So this is strong for action, visibility, self-assertion, training, launching, and making a move. It is less strong for diplomacy, waiting, or pretending you do not already know what you want. Around April 13th, Mars joins Neptune in your 1st house, and that changes the tone. This is not simple action anymore. This is action mixed with vision, intuition, confusion, projection, or idealism. You may feel strongly that you need to change something about yourself, your image, your role, or your direction. That instinct may be correct, but the details are not fully clear yet. So this is a very good moment for inspiration, image changes, creative identity work, and listening to what is calling you. It is not the best moment for making a permanent decision just because the feeling is intense. Mid-month, the situation gets more definite. Mercury enters Aries on the 15th, so now the issue gets named. You say what you mean. A conversation becomes direct. A decision moves. Something you have been feeling since the 9th now becomes clear enough to explain. This is very good for meetings, pitches, business conversations, boundaries, and cutting away unnecessary softness in communication. You do not need to say everything. You just need to say the right thing clearly. The 16th is one of the strongest dates in the month for you. Mars sextiles Pluto. That is a clean action transit. Good for a firm decision. Good for a boundary. Good for ending something that has been draining your energy. Good for taking one step that changes the direction of the month. If there is something you already know you need to do, that is one of the best days to do it. Then the new moon in Aries arrives on the 17th, and that is your reset point. This is a 1st house new moon. So the new chapter is personal, identity, direction, confidence, appearance, initiative, how you carry yourself, how you want to be seen, and what you are willing to start. A 1st house new moon often changes the outer story because you stop acting like the old version of yourself. This is the point where a personal decision becomes visible. But the chart does not leave it there. By the 20th, the emphasis shifts into Taurus, your 2nd house. That means the question becomes money, value, and sustainability. At the same time, Mars meets Saturn, and this is where reality enters the room. The new direction now has to hold weight. Can you support it? Can you structure it? Can you stop wasting time and energy on things that drain you without giving anything back? This is especially important for Aries rising because the first half of the month is fast, but the 20th asks whether the momentum actually has a foundation. The last part of the month changes the conversation again. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th, and Uranus enters Gemini on the 26th. That activates your third house of communication, writing, sales, media, learning, speaking, and movement. So the late month shift is mental and verbal. A new idea can arrive. A new way of speaking can start. A new business angle, content direction, writing project, sales strategy, or study path can open. This is especially important if your work depends on communication, visibility, or messaging, because the end of April can mark the beginning of a completely different tone. It starts with a relationship truth. Then it moves into personal action. Then it tests that action through money and practical reality. And by the end of the month, it opens a new communication cycle. For Aries rising, the key is simple. Do not act too fast when the vision is still foggy, and do not ignore the practical side once the momentum arrives. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. Taurus rising. April starts by showing you where your routine is out of balance. The full moon in Libra falls in your 6th house, so the month starts with work, routine, health, timing, duties, and daily life. Something there reaches a point where it cannot stay half-managed. A work issue may become more obvious. A routine that looked fine on paper may clearly stop working in real life. A health matter, a sleep issue, a stress pattern, or a time drain may finally demand attention. This is not the glamorous part of astrology, but it is useful because the 6th house is where life either runs smoothly or quietly starts eating your energy. This moon is also in Libra, so the problem is usually one of balance. Too much work, not enough recovery. Too much responsibility, not enough support. Too much saying yes because it is easier than dealing with someone's reaction. If you have been carrying an uneven load, the beginning of April makes that much harder to ignore. For some Taurus rising people, this is about the job itself. For others, it is about the body, the schedule, or the slow buildup of exhaustion that nobody sees because you are still functioning. Functioning is not the same as thriving. The chart is making that clear early. Then the month goes inward. Mars enters Aries and moves into your 12th house. That changes the tone immediately. You are not moving into a loud, visible Mars transit. You are moving into a hidden one. So from that point on, the real story may be happening behind the scenes, in your head, in your sleep, in your stress level, in your private frustrations, in a hidden plan, in old resentment, or in something you are preparing quietly before anyone else knows what you are doing. Mars in the 12th is often less about open conflict and more about background pressure. It can also bring the feeling that your energy is getting tied up in things nobody else fully understands. That is why the second week of April is not really about charging ahead. It is more about noticing what is draining you from underneath. Maybe you are carrying too much in silence. Maybe you are wasting energy on a situation that should have ended already. Maybe there is a private fear, a hidden complication, or a behind-the-scenes mess that has been costing more than you admitted. Taurus usually likes to deal with solid facts, but this transit is not entirely solid. It works through the hidden layer first, which means you may feel more private, more tired, more reflective, or just less interested in discussing things before you have your own answer. Around the 13th, Mars meets Neptune in Aries, still in that 12th house, and this is where the picture gets less simple. This transit can make you feel deeply intuitive and slightly foggy at the same time. Good for retreat, planning, prayer, therapy, dream work, private art, and understanding what has been going on underneath the surface. Not good for vague enemies, mixed motives, martyrdom, or pretending confusion counts as peace. If a situation has been draining you quietly, this conjunction can make it impossible to keep dressing it up as just stress. It also tends to expose where your boundaries have been too soft, especially in situations where you are carrying more than you should simply because you can. Mid-month, the fog starts getting words. Mercury enters Aries on the 15th, and now the hidden issue gets a name. A private conversation can matter. A realization clicks. You understand what has been bothering you, or why something has been taking more energy than it should. Mercury in the 12th is not loud, but it is useful. It helps you think clearly in private. It helps you plan before you speak. It helps you understand the real problem instead of just reacting to the symptom. If you have needed to step back and decide what you really think, that part of the month is good for it. The 16th is stronger. Mars sextile Pluto is one of the better action dates in the month for you. But it is not showy action. It is quiet, deliberate, and effective. Good for ending one bad habit. Good for withdrawing from one draining person. Good for handling one hidden problem directly. Good for making one serious decision and not discussing it to death afterward. If the first half of April shows you what is off, this is where you can actually do something useful about it. Then the new moon in Aries arrives on the 17th, and that is your reset point, but it is still a private one. This is not a big public beginning yet. It is more like a behind-the-scenes opening. Something old is ending. Something hidden is being cleared. A private chapter starts closing so that a visible chapter can open later. For some Taurus rising people, this is rest. For others, it is stepping back from a draining dynamic. For others, it is planning quietly, healing something, or finally admitting that your energy cannot keep being spent this way. That is still a beginning. It is just not the kind that needs an announcement. By the 20th, the month changes, and so do you. The sun enters Taurus, which brings the spotlight back to your first house. Better. You become more visible, more grounded, more embodied, more in charge of your own pace again. But it happens on the same day Mars meets Saturn, and that is important. Because it means whatever you have been processing privately now needs a stronger boundary and a more realistic structure. The lesson is not just take care of yourself. It is build your life in a way that stops wasting your energy. That can mean clearer nose, firmer pacing, better use of time, less rescuing, less carrying, and less pretending you can keep absorbing everything without consequence. Then the late month story becomes financial. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th, and Uranus enters Gemini on the 26th. That activates your second house of money, resources, possessions, pricing, and self-worth. This is not just a nice little transit at the end of the month. It is the beginning of a bigger shift in how you handle value. New income ideas can appear. A different pricing model can begin to make sense. A new way of earning can open. A financial pattern may need to change quickly. Taurus likes stability, but Uranus in the second often teaches that real security is not just holding on. Sometimes it is adapting faster and valuing yourself more accurately. If you have been undercharging, mispricing, or clinging to an old money pattern because it felt familiar, the final week of April starts shaking that loose. It starts with a problem in daily life. Then it moves into hidden pressure and private correction. By the 20th, the focus returns to you and how you use your energy. And by the end of the month, money and value begin changing in a more serious way. For Taurus rising, the key is simple. Do not force visibility too early, and do not ignore what the body and schedule are already telling you. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. Gemini rising. For Gemini rising, April starts by showing you where the spark is still real and where it isn't. The full moon in Libra on April 2nd falls in your 5th house. So romance, creativity, pleasure, children, visibility, and the question of what still feels alive all come into focus. A 5th house full moon usually brings something to a peak. A romantic matter becomes clearer. A creative block breaks. A child-related issue needs attention. Or you simply realize that one part of life has become all effort and no spark. Libra wants balance, and in the 5th house that often means the balance between duty and joy, attention and indifference, desire and habit. If something has been half alive, the beginning of April makes that much harder to ignore. Then the pressure shifts into your 11th house. Mars enters Aries on April 9th, and that moves the action into friends, groups, networks, audience, collaborations, and long-range plans. This is where the month starts moving faster, socially. You may get more direct with friends, more impatient with group politics, or more serious about what you are actually trying to build. Mars in the 11th is good for pushing a plan forward, promoting something, taking initiative with a network, or stepping into a more active role in a group. It is less good for wasting time in circles that talk a lot and produce very little. If a friendship or alliance has been weak, this transit usually makes the weakness easier to see. Around April 13th, Mars meets Neptune in Aries, still in that 11th house. And this is where things get exciting and slightly unreliable at the same time. A group can feel inspiring. A collaboration can look promising. A future plan can suddenly seem much bigger. That may be real. But Neptune also makes people hear what they want to hear and assume what has not actually been agreed. So this part of the month is very good for vision, imagination, creative community, and dreaming bigger about the future. It is not the best moment for assuming everyone is on the same page just because the mood is good. If someone is vague now, notice it. If a plan sounds wonderful but has no structure, notice that too. By mid-month, things get more definite. Mercury enters Aries on the 15th, and that helps immediately. The idea gets words. The plan gets named. The conversation becomes direct. This is very good for networking, pitching, organizing, promoting, asking, inviting, and saying clearly what you want from a friend, a group, an audience, or a future goal. If the first half of the month shows you which people and plans have energy, Mercury helps you sort out which ones also have logic. You do not need to keep every option alive. You need to know which one is worth your time. The 16th is one of the better action dates in the month for you. Mars sextiles Pluto. This is where you can take one strong step and make it count. Good for choosing a project, making a strategic social move, cutting off a distraction, committing to one future direction, or having the direct conversation that clears the air. If there is a plan you have been circling, this is a much better date to move on it than the 13th. The 13th gives vision. The 16th gives force. Then the new moon in Aries arrives on the 17th, and that is your real reset point for the future. This is a new moon in the 11th house, so the new chapter is about goals, alliances, audience, community, social direction, and what you are building over time. New people can matter here. A new network can open. A new long-range goal can become real enough to act on. A different future starts to look more practical than the old one. For some Gemini rising people, this is the moment a group effort begins. For others, it is when an old social pattern ends and a better one starts replacing it. But the chart does not let you stay in possibility forever. By the 20th, the emphasis shifts into Taurus, your 12th house. That means the question becomes rest, retreat, closure, privacy, behind-the-scenes work, and what is happening underneath all the social motion. At the same time, Mars meets Saturn, and that is where reality enters. So, whatever future plan looked exciting in the middle of the month now has to survive contact with limits. Time, energy, focus, mood, sleep, attention, all of that matters now. This is especially important for Gemini rising because you can get genuinely excited about 10 things at once. The 20th asks which one is worth your real energy and which ones are just mentally entertaining. The final week is the real headline. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th and Uranus enters Gemini on the 26th. That activates your first house. So the late month shift is personal. New image, new direction, new style, new tone, new way of presenting yourself, new appetite for freedom. Some Gemini rising people will change how they look. Some will change how they speak. Some will feel very strongly that they are done playing a role they outgrew months ago. Uranus in the first is not subtle over time. It pushes reinvention. Venus entering first softens it and makes it more attractive, but Uranus is the bigger story. The end of April begins a period where your identity can change much faster than the people around you expect. It starts with romance, creativity, or joy coming into focus. Then it moves into social momentum and future plans. By the 20th, the pressure turns inward and asks what is actually sustainable. And by the end of the month, you begin a new personal cycle. For Gemini rising, the key is simple. Do not confuse social excitement with a real plan. And do not underestimate how quickly your own direction can change once the final week arrives. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. Cancer rising. April opens at home, not out in public. The full moon in Libra on April 2nd falls in your 4th house. So the month starts with home, family, living situation, property, emotional foundations, and the private side of life that other people do not always see. A 4th house full moon usually brings something to a peak there. A family issue becomes clearer. A domestic imbalance gets harder to ignore. A decision about where you live, who you live with, or what peace actually requires may move faster than expected. If something in the home has been off, the beginning of April makes that much more obvious. Because this full moon is in Libra, the issue is usually about balance. Too much pressure in the home, too much emotional labor, too much compromise without a real solution. For some Cancer rising people, this is a parent or family matter. For others, it is about the living environment itself, the need for more stability, or the feeling that your private life is carrying more weight than your public life admits. The first few days of the month are useful because they show you where the foundation needs correcting. Then the pressure moves up to the top of the chart. Mars enters Aries on April 9th, and that activates your 10th house of career, reputation, authority, and public direction. From that point on, work matters speed up. A boss can become more demanding. A deadline can become more urgent. A career decision can move forward faster. You may also feel more visible and more impatient with weakness, delay, or confusion in professional matters. Mars in the 10th is good for action, ambition, leadership, and pushing something ahead. It is less good for power struggles if people are disorganized or unclear. This is where the month starts feeling more serious. You may be asked to act decisively at work. You may need to define your role more clearly. You may feel pressure to perform, lead, or take control of something that has been drifting. In some cases, this is good news because it brings movement where things were stagnant. In other cases, it shows you exactly where the public or professional structure around you is weaker than it should be. Either way, from April 9th onward, the career story is active. Around April 13th, Mars meets Neptune in Aries, still in your 10th house, and that changes the tone. This is where ambition and confusion can mix. A professional path can look inspiring but not yet solid. Someone in authority can be vague. A role can feel meaningful but unclear. You may feel strongly called toward a different public direction, but not yet know the exact form. This is very good for creative work, spiritual work, healing professions, artistic direction, or any role where vision matters. It is not a great transit for assuming everybody understands the plan when nobody has actually defined the plan. So around the 13th, follow what feels meaningful, but do not confuse inspiration with structure. If a work situation is foggy, notice that. If a boss or system is sending mixed signals, notice that too. Neptune in the 10th often reveals where people are improvising while pretending they have a map. It can also show where you are ready to stop doing work that has no soul in it. By mid-month, the picture gets clearer. Mercury enters Aries on the 15th, and now the career story gets words. Meetings matter more. Decisions move faster. Conversations with authority figures become more direct. You may have to state what you want, define your role, ask for something, pitch something, or respond quickly to a professional development. This is a good transit for sending applications, making announcements, clarifying responsibilities, and saying clearly where you stand in a work matter. The 16th is one of the stronger action dates in the month for you. Mars sextiles Pluto. This is one of the strongest moments in the month for a career move, a clean decision, a strategic pivot, or a moment of quiet power around public direction. Then the new moon in Aries arrives on the 17th, and that is your reset point in career and public direction. A 10th house new moon can begin a new role, a new project, a new public identity, a new title, or simply a different level of seriousness about where you are going. This is the point in the month where a professional beginning becomes possible. For some Cancer rising people, that means more visibility. For others, it means more responsibility. For others, it means deciding that the old direction no longer deserves more of your time. From the 20th onward, the focus shifts to your 11th house. That brings in support, networks, colleagues, friends, teams, and the future around the career move. At the same time, Mars meets Saturn, and that matters because it forces you to get realistic about the social and professional structure around your goals. This is where you see who is really with you. This is especially important for Cancer rising because the middle of the month can push you into visibility quickly. The 20th asks whether the people around that visibility are strong enough, reliable enough, and serious enough. If a team, friendship, or professional network is weak, this is where you notice. If there are better allies available, this is also where they become more important. The final week shifts the story again. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th, and Uranus enters Gemini on the 26th. That activates your 12th house. So, while the middle of April is public and career heavy, the end of April turns inward. Private life, rest, dreams, intuition, hidden stress, behind the scenes change, and what is happening underneath the visible story all become more important. Venus there can help with peace, reflection, and stepping back. Uranus there is the bigger signal. It suggests that a hidden part of your life is beginning to change quickly. Sleep patterns may shift. Intuition may get louder. A private realization may become impossible to ignore. A hidden plan may begin forming. This can also mean that while everybody else is watching your public movement, the real next chapter is already starting somewhere quieter. A private awakening. A behind-the-scenes exit. A deeper internal change that has not become visible yet. That is why the final week should not be underestimated. It does not look loud, but it matters. It starts with home, family, and emotional foundations coming into focus. Then it pushes hard on career, authority, and public direction. By the 20th, the question becomes support, networks, and whether the future around that move is solid. And by the end of the month, the pressure turns inward and a quieter, more private story begins. For Cancer rising, the key is simple. Do not ignore what home is telling you at the start, and do not mistake public momentum for the whole story when the final week is already shifting something deeper underneath. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. Leo rising. For Leo rising, April starts by showing you what needs to be said, signed, sorted, or finally dealt with. The full moon in Libra on April 2nd falls in your 3rd house, so the month starts with messages, paperwork, decisions, conversations, short trips, siblings, neighbors, admin, and the general state of your mental traffic. A 3rd house full moon usually brings something to a conclusion, or makes something obvious enough that you cannot keep postponing it. A conversation may finally happen. News may arrive. A document, application, or agreement may need a response. If you've been juggling too many small things and pretending that counts as peace, the beginning of April makes the overload easier to see. Because this full moon is in Libra, the issue is usually one of balance. Too many obligations, too much back and forth, too much explaining, too much mental noise. For some Leo rising people, this is a sibling issue or a practical decision that has been hanging in the air. For others, it is about travel, paperwork, writing, transport, or simply the feeling that the pace around you has become messy and inefficient. The point is not drama. The point is clarity. The first few days of the month tell you what needs to be answered, signed, said, or sorted. Then the month gets bigger very quickly. Mars enters Aries on April 9th, and that activates your 9th house. This is where the horizon opens. Travel, teaching, learning, publishing, legal matters, immigration matters, big picture direction, worldview, faith, and long-range planning all start moving faster. Mars in the 9th usually gives a stronger urge to move, expand, decide, or take a bigger step. This can be excellent for pushing forward with applications, academic matters, travel plans, broadcasts, courses, publishing, legal strategy, or a plan that takes you beyond your current limits. It also makes you less patient with narrow thinking, small people, and pointless delay. This is one of the reasons April can feel so different for Leo rising. The first week is busy and local. The second week is larger. You may suddenly care less about the small mess and more about the larger direction. You may feel ready to leave something behind, say yes to a bigger path, or finally move on a plan that has been sitting in the idea stage too long. Mars in the ninth does not like staying stuck in a room when the chart is clearly trying to open a road. Around April 13th, Mars meets Neptune in Aries, still in your ninth house, and this is where the big vision becomes more complicated. On the positive side, this can bring inspiration, spiritual conviction, creative teaching, meaningful travel, and a very strong sense that you are meant to move towards something larger. On the difficult side, it can bring fog. A plan can feel right without yet being practical. A legal or academic matter can become unclear. A teacher, authority figure, or belief system can seem more certain than it really is. This is not a bad transit. It is just not a simple one. It is better for vision than for blind certainty. Better for following the signal than for pretending the map is already complete. So, around the 13th, pay attention to what feels meaningful, but keep one hand on reality. If you are planning travel, double-check details. If you are dealing with legal or academic matters, do not assume because something sounds promising that it is already settled. If you are teaching, publishing, or launching a message, this can be a very inspired period, but it still needs form. Neptune in the ninth often enlarges the dream before the structure arrives. By mid-month, the picture gets clearer. Mercury enters Aries on the 15th, and now the ninth house story gets words. This is good for important emails, applications, legal communication, publishing, teaching, broadcasting, travel arrangements, and naming the direction you want to take. If Mars brought the push, Mercury brings the explanation. This is where you can finally say what you have been moving toward. Very good for making the plan legible to other people. Also very good for saying what you believe without burying it in too much performance. The 16th is one of the stronger action dates in the month for you. Mars sextiles Pluto. This gives you one powerful action window. Good for making a serious move in education, legal matters, publishing, travel, or long-range strategy. Good for a conversation with weight behind it. Good for a decision that changes the direction of the month. If something bigger has been building since the 9th, the 16th is where you can act on it with more force and less confusion. Then the new moon in Aries arrives on the 17th, and that is your reset point in the 9th house. This is where a new chapter begins around travel, belief, study, teaching, publishing, legal matters, or the broader direction of your life. A 9th house new moon often opens roads. It can bring a new course, a new application, a new destination, a new audience, or simply a stronger commitment to the life direction that actually feels true. For some Leo rising people, this is a public message. For others, it is a practical plan that takes them further than where they are now. Either way, the month is clearly asking for expansion. But by the 20th, the chart asks for proof. The sun enters Taurus and shifts the emphasis to your 10th house of career, public role, reputation, and authority. On the same day, Mars meets Saturn. That means the big vision now has to become a public reality. What started as possibility now has to become a role, a plan, a duty, or a visible structure. For Leo rising, this is the important turn. The middle of the month opens the horizon. The 20th asks whether you can build something real with it. Career decisions may become more serious. A boss or authority figure may become more relevant. A leadership responsibility may increase. This is where the larger direction has to survive contact with the real world. This can also be the point where you realize the bigger path you want requires a career change, a professional adjustment, or more discipline than you first hoped. Mars-Saturn in this part of the sky is not there to flatter you. It is there to ask whether you are prepared to carry the weight of what you say you want. That is not punishment. It is how the chart tests seriousness. Late April opens a different chapter. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th, and Uranus enters Gemini on the 26th. That activates your 11th house of friends, groups, networks, allies, community, audience, and long-term plans. So the end of April starts changing the social future around you. New people can enter. Better contacts can appear. Different communities can become more important. Existing friendships may change tone. A new audience can open if you are teaching, creating, posting, or promoting. This is very useful if the middle of the month pushes you into a bigger direction, because now the right people start matching more. Uranus in the 11th over time can change your whole network and your idea of who belongs in your future. That does not happen in one day, but the doorway opens now. Venus makes the first part of it easier, lighter, and more socially attractive. Uranus is the deeper shift. The people around your future may not be the same people around your past. Late April starts showing you that. It starts with news, decisions, and mental clutter becoming more obvious. Then it opens the horizon through travel, study, belief, publishing, or a larger plan. By the 20th, that larger plan has to become practical and public. And by the end of the month, a new social and future-oriented chapter begins to open around the right people, the right networks, and the right audience. For Leo rising, the key is simple. Do not get stuck in small problems at the beginning, and do not mistake inspiration for completion once the bigger road opens. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. Virgo rising. For Virgo rising, April starts by forcing a more honest look at what you give, what you get back, and whether that balance still works. The full moon in Libra on April 2nd falls in your second house. So the month starts with income, spending, pricing, possessions, self-worth, and the balance between what you give and what you get back. A second house full moon usually brings a practical matter to a peak. A financial issue becomes harder to ignore. A payment, expense, pricing decision, or earning problem can come into focus. In some cases, it is simple. The numbers are not working the way they should. In other cases, it is deeper. You realize you have been accepting less than something is worth because it was easier than resetting the standard. Because this full moon is in Libra, the issue is usually one of balance. Too much effort for too little return. Too much generosity in the wrong place. Too much dependence on somebody else's terms. If there's been an uneven exchange around money, time, or value, the beginning of April makes that easier to see. This is a useful moon because it shows where the leak is. It may not be pleasant, but it is efficient, which is usually enough to get Virgo's attention. Then the month goes deeper. Mars enters Aries on April 9th and activates your 8th house. That moves the pressure into shared resources, debt, taxes, trust, intimacy, financial entanglements, psychological power dynamics, and the things that are never just about the surface issue. Mars in the 8th is not casual. It can bring urgency around money owed, money shared, money expected, or money tied up with somebody else. It can also make emotional dynamics more intense. If there has been avoidance around a trust issue, a dependency, an unequal exchange, or a financial arrangement that is too vague, this is where it becomes harder to leave it untouched. This is why the second week of April can feel more serious than it looks from the outside. A conversation about shared resources can matter. A tax, debt, loan, inheritance, or partner income issue can become more active. For some Virgo rising people, this is about emotional honesty more than money. For others, it is exactly about money, but with emotional consequences attached. The 8th house has a way of mixing the two, and then pretending it is coincidence. It is not. Around April 13th, Mars meets Neptune in Aries, still in your 8th house, and that is where the picture becomes less simple. This can bring idealism, confusion, projection, blurred boundaries, mixed motives, wishful thinking, or vague agreements around shared money and trust. It can also bring deep intuition, psychological insight, and the kind of clarity that only comes when you stop pretending something is fine. Good for therapy, spiritual honesty, facing a trust issue, or seeing the emotional layer underneath the financial arrangement. Not good for signing on to something vague, taking somebody's word as enough, or assuming that a strong feeling means the terms are solid. So around the 13th, the rule is very simple. If it involves shared resources, shared obligations, intimacy, or trust, get clearer, not dreamier. If somebody is vague, notice that. If a financial arrangement sounds beautiful but has no real structure, notice that too. Neptune in the 8th can be healing, but only when you are not using fantasy as paperwork. By mid-month, things become easier to define. Mercury enters Aries on the 15th, and now the 8th house issue gets words. This is where the conversation happens. Terms can be named. A private tension can be discussed. Money matters can be negotiated more directly. It is also a good transit for research, deep thinking, paperwork connected to taxes or debt, and getting specific about a financial or emotional arrangement that has been too loose. Mercury does not solve the problem by itself, but it makes it harder to hide behind confusion. The 16th is one of the stronger dates in the month for you. Mars sextiles Pluto. That gives you one clean action window. Good for confronting one truth. Good for setting one boundary. Good for handling a shared resource issue directly. Good for making one serious move in a complicated situation. If the second week has shown you where the pressure is, the 16th is where you can actually do something useful with that information. Then the new moon in Aries arrives on the 17th, and that is your reset point in the 8th house. This is not a light new moon. It is a deep one. It can begin a new chapter in financial agreements, debt repayment, trust, intimacy, or emotional terms. For some Virgo rising people, this is where a messy arrangement gets restructured. For others, this is where a hidden issue finally gets handled. For others, it is where a private emotional reality stops being hidden and starts becoming a decision. Either way, something in the 8th house story begins again on new terms. By the 20th, the mood changes. The sun enters Taurus and shifts the emphasis to your 9th house. That brings in perspective distance, planning, legal matters, education, travel, publishing, and the larger picture. On the same day, Mars meets Saturn, and that matters because it forces the 8th house story to become realistic. What was emotional, financial, or entangled in the middle of the month now has to make sense in the long term. This is where you ask the bigger question. Does this arrangement support the future or only prolong the problem? Does this agreement hold up outside the mood of the moment? This part can actually feel like relief, because once Taurus lights up your 9th house, you start seeing farther ahead. The month stops being only about pressure and starts becoming about direction. If there's legal paperwork, academic movement, a travel matter, publishing, or a wider strategy connected to what is happening, that becomes more relevant after the 20th. Virgo often feels better once there is a workable map. Taurus in the 9th starts drawing one. The final week changes the public story. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th, and Uranus enters Gemini on the 26th. That activates your 10th house of career, reputation, authority, public role, and direction in the world. This is not a small shift. Something new starts opening at the top of the chart. A career change can begin. A different public identity can begin. A new role, new method, new professional interest, or a sudden need for more freedom in work can start becoming obvious. Venus first smooths the transition. It can bring better conversations, better visibility, or a more attractive opening. Uranus is the bigger story. Over time, it changes how you want to work and what kind of public life you are actually willing to build. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. This is especially important because it means April does not end where it began. It starts with money and value. It moves through deeper pressure around shared resources and trust. Then it opens the larger picture. And by the end of the month, it starts shifting the public and professional direction altogether. So the 8th house intensity in the middle is not just there to complicate your life. It is there to clear space for a more honest next step. It starts with money and value becoming more obvious. Then it moves into shared resource pressure, trust issues, and deeper decisions. By the 20th, the larger plan starts to matter more than the immediate tension. And by the end of the month, a new career or public life cycle begins to open. For Virgo rising, the key is simple. Do not stay vague in the middle of the month, especially where money, trust, or obligations are involved, and do not miss the fact that the final week is opening a much bigger professional shift than it first appears. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. Libra rising. For Libra rising, April starts by putting you and your needs back at the center of the story. The full moon in Libra on April 2nd falls in your first house. So the month starts with your body, your energy, your mood, your needs, your image, and the role you have been carrying. A first house full moon usually makes something personal impossible to ignore. You may see more clearly how tired you are, how much you have been accommodating, how much pressure you are carrying, or how much your own position in a situation has changed. If you've been trying to keep peace by editing yourself too much, the beginning of April shows the cost of that. Because this moon is in Libra, the issue is balance. Your needs versus everyone else's. Your identity versus the role you have been playing. Your body versus the pressure you have normalized. For some Libra rising people, this is a visible turning point in appearance, confidence, or how you present yourself. For others, it is more about a decision. What you are no longer willing to keep carrying just to keep the room comfortable. Either way, the month opens with self-awareness, and it is not subtle. Then April moves straight into your 7th house. Mars enters Aries on April 9th. That puts pressure directly into relationships, clients, contracts, negotiations, and one-to-one dynamics. So after the month starts with you, it quickly becomes about the other person. Relationship matters speed up. The tone gets sharper. If there has been tension in a partnership, this transit usually brings it into the open. If there is a client matter hanging in the air, this is where the terms start moving. This can be useful because vague situations stop staying vague. But it can also bring friction if both people are tired, impatient, or talking from ego. Around April 13th, Mars meets Neptune in Aries, and that is where things get more complicated. Attraction can increase. Hope can increase. Mixed signals can increase. A person can sound certain while still being unclear. This is a good transit for compassion, romance, and meaningful connection when the facts are clean. It is not a good transit for assuming chemistry is the same thing as agreement. By mid-month, the tone gets more direct. Mercury enters Aries on the 15th, and now the relationship issue gets words. A partner speaks plainly. A client asks for clearer terms. You say what you really think instead of dressing it up. This is a good part of the month for negotiation, direct conversation, and finally getting to the point in a one-to-one situation that has been wasting time. The 16th is one of the stronger dates in the month for you. Mars sextiles Pluto. This is where a serious conversation can actually move something. Good for a firm boundary. Good for cutting through confusion. Good for making a relationship or client matter more honest. If something needs a decision, this is one of the cleaner dates to take it. Then the new moon in Aries arrives on the 17th, and that is your reset point in the 7th house. New relationship chapter. New client. New agreement. New terms. New understanding in an existing bond. A 7th house new moon is not abstract. It changes the terms between you and another person. But the story does not stay on the surface. By the 20th, the sun enters Taurus and shifts the emphasis to your 8th house. That brings in trust, shared money, intimacy, debt, taxes, obligations, and consequences. On the same day, Mars meets Saturn, and that is where the relationship story gets real. What was said in the middle of the month now has to hold weight. If money is involved, the structure has to be clear. If intimacy is involved, the trust has to be real. If a promise was made, the pressure test comes here. Late April opens the horizon. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th, and Uranus enters Gemini on the 26th. That activates your 9th house of travel, study, teaching, legal matters, publishing, perspective, and bigger direction. So the end of April starts opening a wider road, more space, more movement, a different belief, a new educational or travel path, a larger mental horizon. This part of the month feels lighter because it is lighter. It gives you air after the heavier relationship and eighth house intensity. It starts with a personal turning point. Then it moves into relationship reality and direct negotiation. By the 20th, the deeper terms of trust and consequence matter more. And by the end of the month, a larger horizon starts opening. For Libra rising, the key is simple. Say less that is polite and more that is true, especially in the middle of the month when the relationship story gets real. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. Scorpio rising. For Scorpio rising, April starts by showing you what has been quietly draining you behind the scenes. The full moon in Libra on April 2nd falls in your 12th house. So the month starts with hidden stress, endings, private burdens, sleep, intuition, dreams, and whatever has been happening in the background while you were trying to function normally on the surface. A 12th house full moon often exposes what has been quietly draining you. Fatigue becomes more obvious. A private worry becomes harder to dismiss. A hidden situation starts showing its cost. Because this full moon is in Libra, the issue is usually imbalance you have not named yet. Too much carried in silence. Too much emotional weight in the background. Too much tolerance for something that should have ended earlier. For some Scorpio rising people, this is psychological. For others, it is a secret, a retreat, a hidden enemy, an old pattern, or simply the realization that your reserves are lower than they should be. The first days of April are not loud, but they matter because they show the leak. Then the month becomes practical very quickly. Mars enters Aries on April 9th and activates your sixth house of work, health, routine, body, schedule, duties, and daily systems. This is where the pressure becomes visible. Work speed increases. Responsibilities feel heavier. You may become more impatient with inefficiency, more aware of time being wasted, and less willing to let poor systems continue. Mars in the sixth is good for getting moving, fixing routines, training harder, pushing a project, and taking practical action. It is not good for ignoring stress signals or pretending the body can keep paying for every bad habit indefinitely. This can be one of the more useful parts of the month for you, because after the quiet opening, the problem becomes actionable. If your workload is too high, you see it. If your routine is badly built, you see it. If your health or nervous system has been under pressure, this is where the chart asks for a practical correction. Around April 13th, Mars meets Neptune in Aries, still in the sixth house, and that is where work and health matters get less straightforward. A job can become chaotic. A task can be less clear than it first looked. A health issue can be harder to pin down. Motivation can swing between inspired and strangely depleted. This transit can be excellent for healing work, spiritual discipline, creative labor, and compassionate service. It can also make routines feel too porous if there are no clear boundaries. So around the 13th, simplify. If something is unclear at work, ask directly. If a schedule is draining you, stop pretending it is sustainable. If the body is speaking, listen. Neptune in the sixth is good for tuning in, but not for magical thinking about the body or the job. By mid-month, things become more precise. Mercury enters Aries on the 15th, and now the sixth house issue gets a name. This is where you can finally define what is wrong in the work system, the health routine, or the daily structure. Good for appointments, practical conversations, rescheduling, correcting processes, and making a plan that is actually usable. The 16th is one of the stronger dates in the month for you. Mars sextiles Pluto. Very good for one decisive systems change. Good for a firm decision around work, health, or routine. Good for ending a bad habit, confronting one practical problem directly, or cutting out something that has been wasting energy. If the week has shown you the weak point, the 16th gives you the force to fix it. Then the new moon in Aries arrives on the 17th, and that is your reset point in the sixth house. New routine, new health focus, new schedule, new daily structure, new approach to training, discipline, or how your time is used. A sixth house new moon is extremely practical. It is the part of the chart where the month stops talking and starts building routine. By the 20th, the emphasis shifts. The sun enters Taurus and activates your seventh house of relationships, clients, agreements, and one-to-one dynamics. At the same time, Mars meets Saturn. That means the practical changes you are making now affect other people too. A relationship needs stronger terms. A client matter gets more serious. A partnership needs structure. This is where the month asks whether your daily system supports the commitments you keep making. If not, something has to change. Late April goes deeper. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th, and Uranus enters Gemini on the 26th. That activates your eighth house of shared resources, intimacy, debt, taxes, trust, and emotional entanglement. So the end of April starts opening a new story in the deeper layer of life. Money shared with others may start changing. A trust issue may surface. Intimacy may shift. A dependency may become less tolerable. Uranus in the eighth is not subtle over time. It changes the terms under the surface. It starts with hidden stress and private imbalance becoming visible. Then it moves into work, health, and practical correction. By the 20th, the relationship consequences of those changes become more obvious. And by the end of the month, a new eighth house cycle begins under the surface. For Scorpio rising, the key is simple. Fix the daily system before the deeper relationship and money issues demand that you fix it under pressure. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. Sagittarius rising. For Sagittarius rising, April starts by showing you which people, plans, and future goals still belong in your life, and which ones don't. The full moon in Libra on April 2nd falls in your 11th house. So the month starts with friends, groups, networks, alliances, audience, long-term plans, and the people around your future. A full moon here usually shows you what still belongs in the plan and what does not. A friendship can become clearer. A group dynamic can peak. A future goal can either gain momentum or show its weakness. Because this full moon is in Libra, the issue is often balance in social or collaborative space. Too much giving, not enough support. Too much loyalty to people who are no longer aligned. Too much time spent in a group that talks more than it builds. For some Sagittarius rising people, the first days of April show exactly which people still fit the future and which ones do not. That is useful, even if it is not always comfortable. Then the mood gets much lighter and much hotter. Mars enters Aries on April 9th and activates your fifth house of creativity, romance, children, pleasure, self-expression, risk, visibility, and joy. This is one of the more enjoyable Mars transits. It brings fire back into life, more desire, more courage, more willingness to take a chance, more interest in pleasure, art, attraction, and being visibly yourself. If things have felt dull, this transit tends to fix that. This is also very good for creative work, dating, performing, launching something with personality, or simply remembering that life should include some actual enjoyment. The difficult side is impatience or excess. Mars in the fifth can make you want immediate excitement, immediate attention, immediate romance, immediate proof. It is fun, but it still needs judgment. Around April 13th, Mars meets Neptune in Aries, still in the fifth house, and this is where things get gorgeous and questionable at the same time. Romantic chemistry can spike. Creative inspiration can become very strong. A person or project can feel destined, meaningful, artistic, magnetic, impossible to ignore. Some of that may be true. Some of it may be projection in better clothes. Neptune in the fifth can make you see what you want to see in love and in art. So around the 13th, enjoy the inspiration, but do not build your whole month on one wave of feeling. Very good for art, music, romance, imagination, and creative risk. Less good for assuming that because something is intense, it is already real. By mid-month, the picture gets clearer. Mercury enters Aries on the 15th, and now the fifth house story gets language. Great for creative expression, bold communication, dating, flirting, pitches, performances, content, and saying what you actually want. If the second week has been all spark, Mercury helps turn it into signal. This is a good time to put words behind desire, behind an idea, or behind a creative direction. The 16th is one of the stronger action dates in the month for you. Mars sextiles Pluto. Good for a bold move in romance, a strong creative decision, a serious choice around visibility, or taking one risk that actually changes something. This is where confidence and force work together. Then the new moon in Aries arrives on the 17th, and that is your reset point in the 5th house. New romance, new project, new visibility, new creative chapter, new relationship to joy. A 5th house new moon opens the heart side of life. It does not promise ease, but it does promise movement where things were flat. By the 20th, the mood gets more practical. The sun enters Taurus and activates your 6th house of work, health, duties, and daily systems. At the same time, Mars meets Saturn. So whatever excitement has been building now has to fit inside a real schedule, a real body, and a real workload. This is where the month asks whether the joy is sustainable or whether it was just a beautiful interruption. It also means work matters may become heavier after the 20th, even if the middle of the month felt playful. Late April changes the relationship story. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th, and Uranus enters Gemini on the 26th. That activates your 7th house of relationships, partners, clients, contracts, and one-to-one dynamics. So the end of April starts a completely different cycle in partnership. New people can appear. Existing relationships can shift. A client or agreement can take a new turn. Over time, Uranus in the 7th changes what kind of relationships you are willing to have and what kind of people you are willing to align with. It starts with social sorting and future clarity. Then it moves into romance, creativity, and visibility. By the 20th, daily reality and workload matter again. And by the end of the month, a new relationship cycle begins. For a Sagittarius rising, the key is simple. Enjoy the spark in the middle of the month, but do not forget that by the 20th, the chart will ask whether the spark can survive routine, work, and reality. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. Capricorn rising. For Capricorn rising, April starts by making public pressures more visible and private tensions harder to ignore. The full moon in Libra on April 2nd falls in your 10th house. So the month starts with career, status, visibility, responsibility, reputation, authority, and the public side of life. A 10th house full moon usually brings a work matter to a peak. A decision about direction becomes clearer. A role becomes more visible. A result arrives. A boss, a system, or a public pressure point becomes harder to ignore. Because this full moon is in Libra, the issue is often balanced between public duty and everything else. Too much responsibility. Too much time spent managing appearances. Too much effort for too little support. For some Capricorn rising people, this is recognition. For others, it is a work issue that forces a decision. Either way, the month opens with the public story becoming more obvious. Then the pressure moves into your 4th house. Mars enters Aries on April 9th and activates home, family, property, roots, private life, and emotional foundations. So after the month starts out in public, the second week becomes much more private. A home matter can speed up. A family issue can demand action. A property decision can move. You may become less patient with tension in the home or with people who bring confusion into your private life. This can also simply feel like more emotional heat under the surface. Capricorn usually functions well under pressure, but Mars in the 4th tends to expose where the foundation is carrying more strain than it should. If home has been unstable, crowded, tense, or unsettled, this is where it becomes harder to brush aside. Around April 13th, Mars meets Neptune in Aries, still in the 4th house, and that is where the home story becomes more complicated. Family dynamics may feel unclear. A living situation may be unsettled. An emotional issue may be stronger than the facts alone would suggest. This transit can be excellent for healing family patterns, creating a more peaceful home, or a move that feels meaningful. It is not ideal for unclear boundaries, family confusion, or assuming somebody means well, and therefore things will somehow organize themselves. So around the 13th, if the home story is foggy, get clearer. If a family matter is emotionally charged, slow down before acting. Neptune in the 4th is tender, but it is not always practical. By mid-month, the picture gets easier to define. Mercury enters Aries on the 15th, and now the 4th house issue gets language. A family conversation happens. A property question becomes easier to discuss. A domestic plan becomes more concrete. Good for talking clearly, deciding what peace actually requires, and dealing with home matters directly rather than silently resenting them. The 16th is one of the stronger dates in the month for you. Mars sextiles Pluto. This is an excellent day for one serious home decision, one family boundary, one clear action around living arrangements, or one move that improves the emotional foundation of the month. Then the new moon in Aries arrives on the 17th, and that is your reset point in the 4th house. New home chapter, new family terms, new emotional structure, new domestic beginning. For some Capricorn rising people, this is literal, like a move or a property decision. For others, it is an internal reset where you stop trying to build your life on a foundation that no longer supports you. By the 20th, the month gets lighter on one level and stricter on another. The sun enters Taurus and activates your 5th house of creativity, pleasure, children, visibility, and joy. At the same time, Mars meets Saturn. So the emotional or domestic pressure of the middle of the month now needs a more durable answer. And at the same time, the chart starts asking you to let more life back in. This can be a useful shift. It reminds you that fixing the foundation is not the whole point. The point is to build a life on it. Late April changes the daily system. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th, and Uranus enters Gemini on the 26th. That activates your 6th house of work, routine, health, time management, systems, and the body. So the end of April starts opening a new chapter in how you work and live daily life. New methods, new schedule, new tools, new health focus, new work environment, or a stronger need for flexibility can start here. Uranus in the 6th over time changes the daily system more than people expect. It starts with public and career matters coming to a head. Then it moves into home, family, and emotional foundation work. By the 20th, you are asked to build something more durable and also allow more life back in. And by the end of the month, the daily system starts changing. For Capricorn rising, the key is simple. Do not treat the private tension in the middle of the month as secondary just because the month begins in public. The private correction is the part that holds everything else up. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. Aquarius rising. For Aquarius rising, April starts by making the bigger picture harder to ignore. The full moon in Libra on April 2nd falls in your 9th house. So the month starts with travel, study, teaching, publishing, legal matters, belief, perspective, and the larger direction of your life. A 9th house full moon usually brings a realization. A plan becomes clearer. A decision about the future gets easier. Something about the larger path stops being theoretical and starts becoming obvious. Because this full moon is in Libra, the issue is often balanced between what is possible and what is actually aligned. For some Aquarius rising people, this is a legal or academic issue. For others, it is travel, publishing, a teaching path, or simply a change in worldview. The first days of April are useful because they show the bigger truth behind the smaller noise. Then the pace picks up quickly. Mars enters Aries on April 9th and activates your 3rd house of communication, writing, speaking, marketing, movement, siblings, short trips, learning, and daily mental traffic. This is where the month gets faster. Messages matter. A conversation may move quickly. A local or practical matter needs action. A writing or content project can get momentum. You may also become more impatient with delays, poor communication, or people who say a lot without saying anything. This is a strong transit for making your point, putting something in motion, sending the message, building a communications plan, studying harder, or becoming more active in the immediate environment around you. It can also make the pace feel crowded if you do not choose your focus carefully. Around April 13th, Mars meets Neptune in Aries, still in the third house, and that is where communication gets more delicate. A message may be inspiring but unclear. A conversation may sound promising but still need facts. A sibling or local issue may be more emotional or confusing than expected. This transit is great for imagination, writing, spiritual study, and creative communication. It is less good for assuming that because something sounds meaningful, it is already precise. So around the 13th, read carefully, ask again, double-check details, and do not rely on vague communication where practical clarity is required. Neptune in the third can make the signal poetic. It can also make it blurry. By mid-month, the signal gets cleaner. Mercury enters Aries on the 15th, and now the third house story gets sharper. This is very good for writing, speaking, sending proposals, marketing, content, pitches, study, practical decisions, and direct conversation. If the second week felt like too much static, Mercury starts helping things sort themselves into words. The 16th is one of the stronger dates in the month for you. Mars sextiles Pluto. Great for one decisive conversation, one strategic move, one smart message, one important document, or one practical action that clears a problem you have been circling. Then the new moon in Aries arrives on the 17th, and that is your reset point in the third house. New communication cycle, new study path, new writing project, new message, new local or practical rhythm. For some Aquarius rising people, this is content, business, promotion, teaching, or a new idea that finally starts moving. For others, it is simply a much clearer way of speaking and acting in the immediate environment. By the 20th, the mood changes. The sun enters Taurus and activates your fourth house of home, family, roots, property, and emotional foundations. At the same time, Mars meets Saturn. So what has been moving fast mentally or practically now has to fit inside a more grounded home reality. A family issue can matter more. A property matter can become serious. A private situation may need structure. This is where the chart asks whether the busyness of the middle of the month is actually supporting your foundation or just running on momentum. Late April is where the fun starts. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th, and Uranus enters Gemini on the 26th. That activates your fifth house of romance, creativity, children, pleasure, visibility, performance, and joy. So the end of April starts opening a much lighter and more alive chapter. New attraction, new creative excitement, new risk, new visibility, new desire to make life more interesting. Uranus in the fifth can change what you enjoy, how you create, and what kind of attention you want. It starts with the bigger picture becoming clearer. Then it moves into communication, movement, and practical action. By the 20th, the home and foundation story becomes more important. And by the end of the month, romance, creativity, and joy start opening in a new way. For Aquarius rising, the key is simple. Use the fast middle of the month well, but do not let movement replace precision, especially around the 13th. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. Pisces rising. For Pisces rising, April starts by showing you where money, trust, and emotional exchange have gone out of balance. The full moon in Libra on April 2nd falls in your 8th house. So the month starts with shared money, debt, taxes, trust, intimacy, emotional entanglement, power dynamics, and the hidden terms under a situation. An 8th house full moon usually brings a private truth closer to the surface. A financial dependency becomes more obvious. A trust issue becomes harder to ignore. A shared resource matter may need a decision. Because this full moon is in Libra, The issue is often fairness in an exchange. Too much given, not enough returned. Too much emotional labor. Too much dependence on unclear terms. For some Pisces rising people, this is money. For others, it is intimacy, trust, and the question of what is actually being shared and what is just being carried silently. The first days of April are useful because they expose where the deeper imbalance is. Then the pressure shifts into your second house. Mars enters Aries on April 9th and activates money, possessions, income, value, pricing, and self-worth. This usually makes financial matters more urgent. You may become more direct about money, more protective of time, more aware of what you are not being paid enough for, more impatient with financial waste. Mars in the second is strong for earning, pushing forward, making a move around income, or taking possessions and value more seriously. It can also bring impulsive spending if you act too fast. This is where the month starts moving from shared pressure into personal value. Very useful if you need to get serious about income, pricing, or protecting what is yours. Less useful if you react emotionally around money without a plan. Around April 13th, Mars meets Neptune in Aries, still in your second house, and that is where money and value can get blurry. Great for inspiration around earning, creative work, spiritual values, and compassionate choices. Not great for vague financial decisions, unclear pricing, undercharging, or assuming that because something feels meaningful it will somehow organize itself financially. So around the 13th, if money is involved, get clearer, not softer. If you are pricing something, be precise. If you are making a value decision, do not do it only from mood, guilt, or hope. Neptune in the second can bring beautiful vision, but it still needs numbers. By mid-month, the situation gets easier to define. Mercury enters Aries on the 15th, and now the money and value story gets words. Good for discussing payment, stating your rate, planning spending, negotiating, and defining what is yours. If the second week showed you where money or value has been too vague, Mercury helps correct that. The 16th is one of the stronger dates in the month for you. Mars sextiles Pluto. This is excellent for one serious move around income, spending, pricing, or a value issue that has been controlling more than it should. Good for deciding, restructuring, drawing a line, or finally acting on what you already know. Then the new moon in Aries arrives on the 17th, and that is your reset point in the second house. New income chapter, new pricing, new self-worth standard, new financial plan, new understanding of what your time and effort are worth. A second house new moon is practical. It begins where value becomes action. By the 20th, the mood changes. The sun enters Taurus and activates your third house of communication, writing, learning, short trips, practical decisions, and daily mental flow. At the same time, Mars meets Saturn. So the money or value story of the middle of the month now has to fit inside a more structured practical plan. This is where budgeting, planning, communicating, or documenting becomes more important. If you need to make your new standard usable in real life, this is the point where that happens. Late April changes the home story. Venus enters Gemini on the 24th, and Uranus enters Gemini on the 26th. That activates your fourth house of home, family, roots, property, and private life. So the end of April starts opening a new domestic chapter. A move, a home change, a family shift, a change in how you define peace, or simply a stronger need for freedom in private life can begin here. Uranus in the fourth over time changes the foundation of life more than expected. It starts with deeper money and trust issues becoming visible. Then it moves into personal value, income, and self-worth. By the 20th, the practical plan matters more than the emotional reaction. And by the end of the month, a new home or private life cycle begins. For Pisces rising, the key is simple. Get precise about value in the middle of the month, because the end of April starts opening a different foundation under the whole story. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. That was April 2026 for all 12 rising signs. These are general rising sign forecasts, so they are useful, but they are not the same as your full natal chart. The real precision comes from your exact birth time, natal placements, house cusps, and the specific transits hitting your chart. For a more personal and much more accurate reading based on your full birth chart, exact transits, and timing, you can book a consultation below. And if this helped, make sure to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what rising sign you're watching for. See you in the next one.